All right, everybody. It's good to see all of you again today. This is James Pelton here with an AMA. I have Matteo here. We're going to be talking about Lattice Exchange today, so I'm very excited for this. This is a LTX coin, not to spoil, but LTX is something that I have been DCAing about $100 a day for quite a while. Okay, so this is one coin that I really believe in the future of, and so I'm really excited just to talk through it, share it with my audience. What I need from you as audience members, need you to hit the like button. Again, the YouTube algorithm is searching for videos that have a high like to viewer ratio. Okay, so if you're watching, a lot of help if you hit the like button as we're going here. If you have questions that you'd like Matteo to talk about or address, feel free to bring those up and we will ask those as they kind of fit into the conversation. So Matteo, thank you so much for joining here today. Could you start out by giving just a little bit of your background kind of as we get started here?
Absolutely. And James, thanks again for the opportunity to be on here. It's, my honor. So just to give you a little bit of background, my name's Mathias. I'm one of the co-founders co-founders of Constellation, but also Lattice Exchange. Many of you may know Constellation as an infrastructure layer ecosystem, layer 0, and Lattice Exchange is actually our first deployment on the application layer on the Constellation hypergraph. And we'll probably get into much more detail of what that means, how that works, and how you guys can be involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I told Matthias it's coming, but I told him that you guys are mostly looking for ways to make money. So we will end with that once we get through kind of what exactly it is. So maybe let's start with what is Constellation. Again, I think a lot of my audience have heard me talk a lot about that, but some might not be familiar with it. This might be the first time they're hearing about that. Do you want to give just a quick, I say quick, but that's a relative term. But could you talk a little bit about what Constellation is?
Absolutely. So we're a layer 0 ecosystem in the entire blockchain industry. We came out of the 2017-18 kind of like crypto hype cycle, where a lot of infrastructure protocols have been developed in the industry. Most of them are not around anymore. We've gritted our teeth in the bear market of 18-19 and came out stronger than ever before. We are partnered with the United States Air Force in an SBIR phase 2, which actually just concluded today as a great success. Which makes us pretty much the only blockchain infrastructure that has official contracts with the Department of Defense. But more so than that, being a layer 0, we're building an ecosystem, right? So you could imagine Solana, you could imagine Ethereum, you can imagine Avalanche. We're right in that circle of peers basically, and we're here with the different consensus algorithm with a different architecture, which is much more lightweight and what we say infinitely scalable. So a lot of different approaches that we've been taking, engineering that protocol from the ground up. So in essence, we want to make it much more easier for developers and you as the community and builders to actually build on our ecosystem. So not only very low transaction fees, even free if you're only sending from wallet to wallet, data validation, which is a feature most of the other protocols can't really do because streaming data requires a lot of throughput, which opens us up to a whole slew of other applications that are pretty unique. And as such, we're not talking about competition really, right? So everybody has that competitive mindset. For us, it's more like, let's play at the same table, cross-chain liquidity, data streaming, right? What does that mean for the future we're really building here? And so that's what we're doing. We have documentation live on our website. We just launched this week our Mainnet 2.0, which was a big milestone. Our Mainnet 1.0 has been live since for the last 2 years. And now we have a code base that's very robust, refactored, and basically towards feature completeness, which is a massive, massive achievement for all of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very exciting about Mainnet 2.0 being launched. Could you maybe talk about what the implications of 2.0? I think a lot of people heard the announcement, but I think a lot of people have no idea what does that mean for Constellation. Like,
Right.
you want
Right.
to
Yeah,
talk
of course. I mean, look, I mean, when we wrote the white paper in late 17, early 18, and we went to the market, I mean, there was nothing, right? There was an idea, it was a vision. Hey, we could do something different than everybody else. And then we started developing, but the token that went live at the time was still based ERC20. So all that changed with the token swap to Mainnet 1.0, where we actually had our own true infrastructure token that had its own SDK, its own implementation with exchanges and so on and so on. And but what, I mean, it's a huge project. So what happened over time, we did a lot of refactoring of the consensus algorithm, a lot of refactoring and improvements on the scalability aspects, nodes joining, leaving, all the nitty gritty of a development process, right? So we're not really talking about, oh, there is something off the shelf that we can just draw code bases from, and then we do a little improvement and then we roll it out. I mean, we refactored from the get-go. So having different release cycles is kind of like normal in an architecture like that. And so Mainnet 2.0 really is a refactoring of the entire code base that allows us to be feature complete and have all these different modules that are on our roadmap plugged in pretty succinctly and very quickly. So if you guys look on our website, we have a roadmap, or in our channels. So all the features like an L0 token or cross-chain liquidity, all these things that we've been talking about for a while now, they become now a real reality, and they are literally around the corner. Some of them are actually implemented already with that Mainnet 2.0 release. So it's a huge step towards feature completeness. And which means that, with the release of our documentation, people can now start building on us. And one of our projects, Alchemy Exchange, they are working in our ecosystem. They have already published, a demo of how what we call state channels work, which you could kind of like, compare to side chains, but it's a very different approach, like architecturally. And so they've shown how that actually looks like and how it works. And so it's there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm having Dagnum on here in a couple of weeks, and he's going to talk through the technical, like what's the difference between an L0 and an L1, and he's going to talk through some of the technical, what is a state channel. So looking forward to that as well. I just wanted to, a lot of people in the audience too are just super thankful that you were able to hop on here and be able to talk with you. So again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, man.
Yes. So that helps understand what Constellation is, what the network is. So now can we talk about Lattice Exchange? So what exactly, again, what would you give as an elevator's pitch for Lattice Exchange?
So first and foremost, I mean, we rebranded or renamed. So we're not Lattice Exchange anymore. We are Lattice Gateway. And the reason for that renaming is basically because we actually broadened the vision. We broadened the scope of what that application and what that product is meant to be and what it has become. So in the beginning, we were like, okay, with our layer 0 infrastructure, which means that cross-chain compatibility is very easy, or should be easier than with most other chains, right? So that was one of our main core tenets, is like, okay, how do we play in DeFi? How do we become an actor in that industry with the technology stack that is being provided by our infrastructure of Constellation, right? So how do we put that onto the road? And Lattice was meant to be a spearhead, a first product, a first application where we show the use cases of our network. And the way things have been going, the industry has been developing, but we as founders, we as a company, our infrastructure has been, evolving. And so we have broadened the scope, and you will be very excited to hear that actually means that people have actually a multitude of more ways to participate in Lattice Exchange, and thus in our ecosystem in general. So what that means in general, initially we only focused on cross-chain liquidity, on liquidity pools, on kind of like AMM algorithms, and that was kind of like a very limited use case. What we've done with Lattice Gateway, we have converged all our pipelines and revenue streams that we have built at Constellation, and we have merged them and combined them onto Lattice Gateway. That means And I need to explain a little bit, because we're building an entire ecosystem, and that is based on our understanding how entrepreneurship works in the blockchain industry. How does doing business with and on a blockchain works? What's the entrepreneurial life cycle? And what we've developed is a concept that we call the token life cycle. So that means, how do you take an idea from its initial seed stages to getting funded, to launching a token, to acquiring liquidity, into the hands of as many users as possible, to basically show your utility and the usability of your application or whatever you're building. So the graphic you're showing basically is how we imagine a token life cycle. And it starts basically, we have incubation services, we have the flight program, we call it. 70 projects, companies have finished our flight program. That means now they are being equipped with a legal framework, with ideation, with how do you do tokenomics, how do you even act in this industry, right? And many of them are experienced entrepreneurs, some of them are newcomers to the industry. So we take them by our hands and put them into a position where they can even be, considered to be competing in this very, fast-paced industry. So once they're ready through the flight program, then we have the launch pad, which is part of Lattice Gateway. So our community now has the opportunity to vote, to determine which of these projects that come onto Lattice Gateway, which of them they want to see getting listed on the launchpad. Launchpad means it's an exposure to our community, to all Lattice token holders, and they can basically chip in with allocations when those projects do their seed raises. Our community can chip in with raises. But also on the back end of that, Lattice Gateway gets an allocation for providing, that service of exposure and so on, which then actually gets, as a stream of rewards, can be emitted back to all the users who hold LTX tokens and who stake them on the Lattice Gateway. And I can explain that more in detail later. But basically, it starts with the launchpad, which is also, the first stage in our token lifecycle. And, they do funding, they develop their product, and now something, some of their products might be centered around what we're doing with data validation. So we at Constellation and Lattice, we view pretty much a lot of products as, we call them nodes. But essentially that means you're processing data of some sort. And we've shown that with the door traffic miner, which counts foot traffic going in and out of a store or an airport or a cigar lounge or whatever. It could be an API stream that connects to your watch or a weather sensor. So all these devices, the world of connected devices, a lot of these things produce data. A lot of that data obviously is not validated, right? So we view these things as each one of those data streams could basically be a business model on Constellation, on Lattice, right? So that's the idea behind everything's a node. And then if you spin that further, then those nodes generate data, they generate revenue, but the revenue often comes back through a real world implementation in the real world, where that data is either being sold or monetized by a user base. So, spinning it further, there is basically a DAO sitting behind each of those potential business models. And those revenue streams, again, they can flow back into Lattice Gateway and the token holders who participate in our ecosystem. So now we're already talking about the second stage of the token lifecycle, but also the second possibility of participation, rewards, and so on and so on. Now, and then if you go further, there's, I think it says bonding, right? So now imagine you're live with your product. Well, now you're interacting in a multi-chain ecosystem, and there's literally hundreds and thousands of other projects out there. And one of the main issues for nascent crypto companies is, how do you attract liquidity? How do you attract it into your trading pair? You're on a DEX, but also on a centralized exchange. It's all interwoven, basically. It's all liquidity pools that are sloshing around. But as a new company, there's often a problem attracting enough liquidity to provide enough utility and interchangeability of your token. And so now we're coming to the next stage, which is bonding. So we offer a bonding product on Lattice Gateway that allows companies to front up let's say $100,000 allocation of their native tokens, and they post it at a discount on the platform, which allows people to basically enter into an arbitrage kind of like scenario. They get, let's say, 10-20% discount, but they post collateral or bonding amounts against that. So that means over time, the company who posts those bonding offers will basically own their own protocol-owned or company-owned liquidity, which then helps to fund pools and incentives and all those kinds of things, which makes them more liquid in this entire ecosystem. It helps them really get ahead. So that's kind of like the idea, but you can also see that, a fraction of those rewards then again go as a third way of participation to Lattice, veLTX token holders, right? And then last but not least, now that we are positioned in a cross-chain ecosystem, we have already an MVP integration on Lattice Gateway. You can already swap from all kinds of chains from one to each other. I actually checked just before this call. We have about 2,000 swapping transactions that already happened on that interface. We have around 13,300 token holders on Lattice, so pretty healthy and active community. And with that, we have already pretty much almost 50% of the circulating supply are already locked up in our veLTX token in our governance that lets people participate in all these things that I have just described. And the last one, again, is the cross-chain part. So we will be building that out even more with a dedicated team. So what you're seeing right now is merely just the MVP function, but the fees that will be coming from cross-chain swapping that users basically accrue will also be forwarded, as rewards to token holders. So this is kind of like the entire entrepreneurial life cycle in the crypto world. And and why do I think that is special is because I don't think many other applications have integrated that entire life cycle in the way we understand crypto entrepreneurship. They have pieces, they have like one or the other. You see launch pads, you see a DEX here, launchpad there, you see a fundraise platform, all these elements are out there, but I haven't seen them as concisely and cohesively merged into an application layer interface like we have it with the gateway. Yeah. So, and that really sprang out of our understanding how crypto works. I mean, we're all deep crypto and really like digesting what does it mean to be an entrepreneur in this ecosystem, and that led to the productization you see, which is much more comprehensive and bigger than initially anticipated. So with all that, it's our gateway into the Constellation ecosystem.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. In fact, I just changed the YouTube title from Lattice Exchange to Lattice Gateway because that makes a lot of sense. And I love just how much you help projects be successful in your ecosystem. So it's, like you said, it's not just a launch pad and then, oh, good luck. And it's not just a exchange, oh, good luck, but you help people. You've seen what makes projects successful in the space, and then you really want to help these projects all along the way. And I think that's just amazing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Couple questions from the audience, and then I do have more questions myself too. Is Lattice the official exchange of Constellation, or is it more like Pancakeswap is to Binance? Do you want to again, just kind of talk about the relationship between Lattice Exchange and Constellation? Is it the same team building it? You want to talk about that?
Well, okay, so there's multiple questions. So first of all, I mean, what Pancakeswap is to Binance is, I mean, that's two different scenarios, right? Binance is a centralized exchange, and Pancakeswap with what they've built on BSC is kind of like their gateway into the DEX world, right? But they own that entire thing. Like our core tenant is not an exchange. We're not a centralized exchange. Constellation Network is an infrastructure protocol layer type thing. and so we're branching out kind of like from the other end of that philosophical or theoretical end of the spectrum, right? So we have the infrastructure layer, and we've built application layer on top of that, which enables us then to be exchangeable with everybody else in the industry. So it's our spearhead product, if you wanna, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and I think so it's built by the same team as Constellation.
Yes,
so
Lattice,
thing.
yes, Lattice. Well, Lattice Gateway has been incepted by Ben and myself, and we wrote the white paper 2 years ago. And I mean, we have a dedicated team that builds out Lattice Gateway, right? So there we have our protocol engineers at Constellation Network. They are dedicated to the infrastructure layer, and we have a product team that is mostly focused on Gateway. So those two are not competing efforts, or I mean, it's completely different, right? One is application layer, one is infrastructure. So those guys, you know, they don't have much to do with each other.
Yes, nope, that makes a lot of sense. Could you talk through, before we get to some more audience questions, which audience, I appreciate you guys. Keep asking questions. I'll get to as many as we can here. So when you're kind of thinking about use cases for Constellation, do you think of like AVAX and Ethereum and Solana? Are you trying to draw project builders to come to Constellation to build, or are you more trying to partner up with other chains? I don't know. How do you think through that, and what's kind of what you're trying to do?
It's a really good question. It's actually both, right? And I give you a little bit of more context. So because we coded everything from the beginning, and we always were a small team, and obviously we're growing, and we have grown a lot, but compared to most other protocols in the industry, we were comparatively small, right? So it took us comparatively longer to actually come with our infrastructure to market. But we didn't just sit at the sideline while we were doing that. So while we were basically waiting, and you all out there waiting for the tech to be finished, Mainnet 2.0, and we were productizing pretty heavily, right? So we did in that sense, we basically flipped it around. Ethereum came around. They had, like, you know, the hello world. There pretty much wasn't any wallets. There was, a terminal wallet, but there were no application layer products when they launched, right? And there was a little bit of GitHub stuff, but there was nothing really there. And we could take the other approach where we heavily productized, and literally every single line of our products has been pretty successful, in a way to our detriment, because we didn't get negative signals of where to go. So everything worked, right? So we did that. So, and that's what you're seeing. So we are productizing a little faster than the infrastructure layer is being released, which means we can do a lot of the work of customer acquisition and beta testing and all those things. We can do them ahead of time and a little faster than it has happened in the industry. So that's kind of like the context. Now I forgot where I wanted to go with that. But,
yeah, no, that's super helpful, and just kind of understanding how it works. Yeah, I was kind of.
You asked. Okay, so you asked about, okay, how do we partner or do we develop? So with that said, we've spearheaded a lot of the visionary stuff, but also the product layer stuff that really pertains to our use cases, right? Like I said, nobody does data validation and peer-to-peer communication on unsecured networks with the Department of Defense, right? Nobody does that, right? And that's a specific use case that is pretty much only able to do on Constellation with our infrastructure right now. So we're spearheading those. And at the same time, we've also been spearheading, I've wrote about that in 2019 or 20. What does it mean if you have an infrastructure like ours? What does that mean for business? How do you need to do business in order to create sustainable cycles of token models? And how do you understand business in the way, like everybody's talking about DeFi and NFTs and so on, but usually those are not, with some exceptions, they are not really circular business models in terms of how their tokenomics work. But now if you have a data source that you can monetize in one way or another, well, like I said, you can form a data DAO And what do you have if you have a data DAO? You have stakeholders. You can emit something to them based on a real world revenue stream, right? So, but no, and that's kind of like what we're trying to get when you ask what people do we want to partner or get with. We want to attract builders, essentially, now that the infrastructure is there, that understand that aspect of doing business on a blockchain, and kind of take that to the next step. How do you design those circular tokenomics? What is your data source? What is your business model that you can benefit from and other people can benefit from, that just hasn't been possible on an Ethereum just because of the way blocks are processed, right? So in a way, you could say that we can realize now business models that we've seen coming up in early 16, 17, where everybody wanted to blockchain everything. And then people, ran against the wall once they realized how the infrastructure actually works. And then it's like, oh, wait a sec. Yeah, okay, well, let's just DeFi, like that's kind of like how it went, right? So and now we're coming back and we're like, no, wait a sec. We actually can do that. And if you do that, that's actually what it mentally means, and it shifts a whole lot of the approach, because people are used to doing things, and we needed to reapproach that and rewrite kind of like the narrative around that, and we've done a lot of that. So we want to attract builders and visionaries, but at the same time, we are not megalomaniacs. So we realize we are already in a pre-made industry that's been around for 10 plus years. So we are thinking about treasury swaps down the road between DAG and, let's say, example, Olympus, or things like that, right? Where we become part of an industry of connected blockchains, which, also has been one of the visions. If you hear speakers from 2017, 18, that's what everybody was talking about. And now we are actually in that reality. And that means we are inviting others to partner. We are building with others, and having that exchange and bringing everybody forward.
Okay, no, that's awesome. That's exactly, I think we needed all that context to get the answer to that question. So I appreciate that. And my audience is getting antsy to know how to make money, but one more educational side before we get to that. So just be patient, audience. We'll get to how to make money soon. Sometimes you have to learn and then make money, but could you talk about, and again, you can go kind of as deep or as shallow as you'd like to, but can you talk about like maybe what's the best business use case for Constellation that makes it that if a business wouldn't work on Ethereum, so they need to use Constellation? Like, what's the type of businesses you're looking for? And maybe this gets into why is Constellation, what's it better for than maybe an Ethereum or a Solana?
I mean, that's a very broad question, and we've done a lot of exploring into the different use cases, right? Like I said, one is transferring data over insecure networks, making sure that your data is encrypted and unalterable, right? that's one, the military use case. But then there's a in essence, we can attack any use case that an infrastructure can do that you can think of. And that's kind of like a little bit of the problem, when people try to pin you down, it's like, what do you do really? Well, it's like everything, So it's kind of a little bit like that. But we have spearheaded a lot of those things. So, that idea around cross-chain liquidity based on an L0 consensus layer. I mean, that is a prime use case. It's one of the biggest elephants in the room in the industry. That is something you can realize with our infrastructure. One thing. The other thing is everything that requires huge amounts of throughput. Think about validating a live HD 1080p video live stream, right? You can maybe do it on a layer 2 or something, but we can do that natively because our nodes, you think about deploying a node, hardware or software on a smartphone, you take your camera out and everything you record runs automatically through that node and is being sent as a hash onto the chain. Now, think about something, and I'm just spitballing here, like a police app, right? You're filming a police encounter, you get into a traffic stop, and now you have the notarization running on the background, which is timestamped, so on and so on. So now you have basically court verifiable content that is cryptographically hashed, right? That's a whole other level of discussion than just having a cloud platform. Yeah, it's timestamped too, but now you can actually show that nobody touched that video file, right? Same. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but you film a UFO in the sky, same thing, right? You can, because the node is sitting on your phone, there's no way you can forge that because it's being directly validated. You're not uploading it to the phone, like it's integrated into your camera function, basically. So things like that. But then also weather sensor data, stock trading data, that leads into the whole topic of oracleization. Most of the oracleization is being done on layer 2s right now. But we could do that natively. Also a very big topic. Things like, and one of the companies is building around that, Alchemy Exchange. They build around a decentralized ad exchange, high throughput fractional bidding on ads. That requires very high throughput in order to launch that decentralized. Nobody could do that. There were ad businesses in 17, 18, but they're not really around anymore because it's not really feasible. We can do that. So just examples. Another one is Genico, who does genetic data around the data DAO, basically, where imagine you can sell or contribute your genetic data. You do a gene test, you contribute your data into that sort of DAO structure, and now it's going to be eligible to certain medical studies or evaluations. And each time you consent to your data being sent off, you can imagine getting a reward for that, right? Because that data is worth a lot. Now in the world, how it works, nobody has any clue that your data is even out there. You're not getting any kickback. But what if, and that's the whole premise here, you could actually consent to that. You can say yes or no, you give it, and then they actually monetize it for you, and you get a return on that, which is a data source that nobody can monetize like that right now. So there is and I'm just painting a very broad picture, but that's kind of like the things we're talking about here. Or our door traffic miner, right? A hardware device that creates a data stream. Now, how do you deal with that, right? What do you do? Well, there's hedge funds that use certain data for certain things, for their algorithmic models of forecasting and things like that, right? That's a real world revenue source that can be funneled back to everybody who owns a device. You literally become a data miner, and that can be software side, that can be hardware side. So there's many different ideas and possibilities here, and people are exploring that. And that's what we want to invite, that entrepreneurial excellence that understands what we're doing here, and kind of like, oh, I have an idea. I have access to something most people don't, and let's monetize that.
Yeah, no, I think what you said is very true, that it's really hard to find a niche when there's so many possibilities. Like literally people are like, hey, what industries could change because of this technology? And it's literally, well, everything. Anything that has data involved could be changed by kind of what's being built with the blockchain in general, but specifically with hypergraph technology. And data ownership is powerful.
Exactly.
People are saying. And I would love to just, since I have you, I would love to just talk with you for hours about the technology, and like we were talking before, some of the philosophy behind some of this. Unfortunately, we only have you for a limited amount of time. And so I think my audience would really like to know if they believe that Constellation is going to be big, the technology is going to, be big. They believe the Lattice Gateway is going to be big. What's the best way for people to jump on the back of the Constellation team and make money from this?
Yeah, look, there's different ways, and I would thread it even a little bigger, right? You can be basically what we've seen. You can be a passive kind of like participant, right? You stake Lattice, you buy Lattice on a DEX or on a centralized exchange. You become a part of our ecosystem. You can go on Lattice Gateway, lattice.is, I think is the new domain, or the old one, Lattice Exchange, works as well. And you take your LTX and you stake it on the governance dashboard. You can select the time frame that you want to stake, and based on the time frame you select, you basically get a conversion rate into our governance token, which is veLTX. And the veLTX is a token that is non-transferable. It's just basically a representation of the amount you staked in there. But say you stake for 6 months, you get a ratio of 1 to 10, right? You put 10 tokens in, you get one veLTX out. If you stake 2 years, well, you get 5 veLTX for each 10 you put in. So there's different incentivized ratios that are behind that. So the longer you lock it up, the more voting power and the more participation over time you get attributed to your stake, which means if you are a smaller holder or user and you opt to lock up longer, then you could eventually, in some ratio, basically outpace relatively somebody who has more tokens than you, but only opts to lock up for 6 months. And that way, there's an incentive schema behind, and based off of that contribution, there are 2 things happen. One thing is you become a very active part of the community. You decide which projects you want to see listed on the launch pad. And you decide what are the emission schemas for all these lines of business that I have outlined on the token lifecycle launch pad: staking, bonding, cross-chain, airdrops. Like, all these things are now within the purview of what you can decide on. So if you don't like it and governance comes together and it's like, hey, let's change that percentage ratio of emissions. Well, okay, you can do that now. So you become an active participant, and then also you're not only active participating, but you're getting emissions based on the percentage stake of veLTX that you have in the entire pool. So obviously, the more of the pool you have, the bigger your percentage allocation of bonuses and rewards and all those things that will kick back to you will be. So this is kind of like how it works. But from an even greater perspective, if you think about it, governance is one of the key deciding factors that makes projects and applications and networks in this industry successful. So we have put a lot of effort to redesigning that Lattice governance, but at the same time, we're also currently redesigning the governance approach for Constellation Network, our hypergraph network. So we're going to take that on-chain as well, so that literally everybody in the industry who holds DAG can also put that into governance votes. So those are the 2 approaches where we really want to see active participation, right? It's not just about, oh, how can I make the most money? Everybody needs to understand that the more they contribute, the more everybody else gains from that. So we really want to educate and attract people that really understand that. So because if if I contribute, if you contribute, that work, the more people think like that, the more everybody else will benefit, and we all will benefit in the end. So that's kind of like the mindset. So yield farming is cool, but if you're actually building and actually contributing, that's 10x of what that yield farming mechanics could ever do for you if you just migrate an industry around. And that's also one of the reasons why we have that entire life cycle, because there is a slice for everybody. It's not just more money. It's like, no, like, if you have a skill set, you can tie into any of these aspects of the life cycle and contribute. And that's what we ultimately want.
Yeah, no, great answer. And one thing that I think, so my audience is used to passive income where you make a lot of money short term. They're looking for these, 300% APRs and things like that. This is not that. This is something that has a long-term vision. And what I'm looking for is I'm hoping to, 50x in 5 years or something like that. Like, I want to be a long-term holder, be a part of the ecosystem going forward, help change the world, change the Air Force, change change Amazon, somebody mentioned, change the way video streaming is done. So that's kind of how I'm approaching this. And so just if people want to know how to buy it, you can just go to KuCoin. And what I do is I have these DCA trading bots that I run, like for LTX is on here, and you can just tell it, basically put in $100 a day or whatever, $25 a day or $25 a week or whatever you want, and it'll just buy there. And then, yeah, you can go to Lattice and you can stake there for as long as you kind of, the time frame that you're looking to, that you think Lattice is going to have some success in, maybe is a good way to think about that. One question from the audience is, do you get those tokens up front, or are they evenly paid out over time with your lockup?
They get paid out immediately once you've locked them up.
Okay, good. And then will LTX always be an ERC20?
Good question. I like that. Yeah, no, it's an ERC20 right now, which I foreshadowed in the beginning. You know, our application productization has been faster than our infrastructure development. So now that L0 tokens are possible on our infrastructure, we will be converting at some point, changing ERC20 LTX into L0 LTX. L0 is our own native token standard on the hypergraph network. And the more popular that standard gets, we will be switching that at some point in the future.
Okay. And then,
but you know, of course, all in due time with all the announcements and all that type of stuff. And you know, in a cross-chain world, I mean, there might be even an argument to leave the ERC20 and just have a basically, you know, a cross-chain bridge scenario so that we are represented in all the networks, right? It's the same, like, you know, there's a USDT or USDC variety on Avalanche, on Polygon, on ETH, on you know, wrapped on BTC. You know, that's kind of like the world we are in right now. So either one, it's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so this is an interesting question. Just a well, actually, let's go to this one first. Does the Constellation team have a vision for the use case of LTX 3 years from now, once the token will have been locked up for the 3-year staking period? Or what's kind of on the roadmap? Maybe I'll make that just a more general question. Where do you see this in 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very legit question, considering if you want to choose to lock up for 3 years, right? And I mean, there's two parts of this. Lattice Gateway, as it is right now, is almost, even though it's already a lot, I mean, but it's still, in our understanding, how we perceive things, it's still an MVP, right? So we've barely started. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that the value creation around the token lifecycle, that won't change over time. So in the contrary, there will be more opportunities that will be plugged as the industry develops. You know, let's say something comes around along the nodes of DeFi, something around data, right? Where we develop the standard and all of a sudden you have a craze in the industry and everybody does data business models. Okay, well, that will be plugged into the token lifecycle, which means that there will be opportunities for revenue sharing, for all those kinds of things. So that gateway, since it really mirrors the entire lifecycle, is expandable, and so you just plug new opportunities into that existing basis, so to speak. Then again, like I mentioned, the cross-chain part, even though it works already, I mean, that's just in MVP stages. Once you're thinking about, you know, $100 million, $500 million liquidity pools, what does that do to transaction fees, right? We are MVP stage, but once you think about those cross-chain liquidity scenarios, how much funds are transferred between those networks, these are huge streams of revenue that potentially can be tapped with a solution like that. So we are really just at the beginning with that. And then ultimately, you know, it's not a passive thing where we as a founding team, you know, it's like, hey, what are you guys going to do in 3 years for us? No, I mean, with that decentralized governance and with that implementation, we have handed over the governance to a decentralized global community. So it's not only up to us. It's like, oh, you know, the Constellation team needs to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, all of us need to do X, Y, and Z to make this a success. And that's ultimately the message here.
That's awesome. Nope. And I think and you truly mean that. Sometimes I have people come on to say, oh yeah, it's a DAO. We want it to be kind of decentralized in the community to build it. But with Constellation, that's actually what you're intending is ownership from the community in it. And then they help make it happen.
Right. And I mean, just to add a little bit to that, I mean, we've always, not always, but we've gotten sometimes some flack for it's like, oh yeah, whatever, you're doing this and that, and people being unhappy. But the reality is, we've stuck to our vision that we've published in late 2017, 18, and we've executed against that ruthlessly over the last 5 years. So nothing really changes. We always deliver on the things that we say we are, within the bounds of what's legally possible and what's technologically possible. And yeah, that's just our nature.
Okay, nope, that makes sense. So let me look at some of these opportunities here. How would you think through it? And this might be a hard question to answer, but again, how do you think about, again, people looking to make money? Like, should they buy DAG token and try to get a soft node and stake that? Should they get LTX and lock that? Should they get into some Constellation projects? Should they diversify out? How do you think through that as an investor?
Well, so first of all, I don't like to talk about speculative dynamics. Like that's not something I really am interested about. If I were somebody out in the community to look at this, then I would say, okay, what is your capability to contribute? Are you interested in running a node for Constellation? Are you interested being a node validator on a decentralized network? If that's the case, you might want to accumulate over time some DAG in order to basically finance that hardware node or software node, right? In order to run that, in order to participate in that. If that's not your thing, or if the amounts are too high, or whatever other reasons there may be, if you're more an entrepreneur, well, it might be better, you come up with a really great idea and you launch your own project on the launch pad. If you like to stick a hardware device into your doorway, or you have a store, or you manage an airport, whatever, right? You're a cleaning crew at an airport, and you talk to your managers like, hey, can I put this device over the entry? Well, okay, that's your device, that's your line of making this network work for you, right? So you can get the device and stick it over your door frame, right? So I can't tell. There's so many profiles of people out there. So what we have is a menu, and whatever you feel comfortable with, that's what you should go with. But like everything else in life, things have risks associated with them, and they have a technology that goes with it. So I can't make any recommendations for you guys out there. But I think it's explained very well. So just dive into it, ask your questions in our community channels. We have, knowledgeable admins, a very knowledgeable community. You mentioned Dagnum. He's extremely, I know him, he's from events, and he's very present on Twitter. And, people can answer these questions maybe better than I can.
That's a very good answer. You'd make a good YouTuber. That's a good YouTube answer. No financial advice. I can't tell you anything. I would tell people kind of the simplest way is just holding on to some of the tokens. So like if you really like the Constellation network, then buy some DAG tokens. If you think the Lattice Gateway is going to be big, buy some LTX tokens. If you think Alchemy is going to be big, buy some ADS tokens. So that's kind of like a basic. You can dig into it more if you want to, and like once you if you get 250,000 DAG, you can soft stake a node. You can stake your LTX tokens we saw in the governance, so things like that. But the simplest way is just buying some of the tokens, get involved in the ecosystem. But I really liked your answer there, Matteo. That was great. Okay, here's kind of a more specific question, and we'll just do a few more questions, then we'll let you go here. You've been super helpful, a lot of information for people to absorb. Will veLTX have any lending capabilities? Is that something?
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, veLTX is non-transferable. That's how it's designed. But you've been asking where's Lattice Gateway in 3 years. That's definitely something we have on the radar. It's not like that escapes our attention. But at this point, no. But we might as well see products or additions come out where that may become a thing. I mentioned treasury swaps in the beginning.
Okay, great answer. And then for people who want to do a soft node staking, is there any plans to offer like a partial soft node program or something if people they're not able to get to that 250,000?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a really good question. Well, there is, like I said, 70 companies have finished our flight program. My understanding is that there is companies in that cohort who basically have ideas around fractionalizing, nodes or soft nodes. They offer that as a service. I don't know any specific names right now, but dive into the community. That's definitely an idea that's been floating around, and you can certainly find that.
Okay. And then maybe last question here, unless we think of something else while we're talking about this. But is there an idea of when governance for the Lattice Gateway would begin, and wherein, how would holder be able to submit proposals? How do participants vote? Some of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with the launch of Lattice Gateway, that launch was, I think this week, or I think it was this week or last week when it actually went live. We issued a new white paper with that. There's Medium posts explaining how staking works, how veLTX works, how the token lifecycle works in terms of the products we have on the gateway. So right now you can take your LTX, you can stake it right away in the governance dashboard. And you can submit proposals basically immediately. There is a threshold of, I think it was 1,000 LT or 2,000 LTX, which is a minimum threshold in order to prevent spamming and kind of like bad-faced proposals, that type of stuff. But basically, anybody who has enough stake can submit proposals. They have certain deadlines, and people can vote on them.
Okay. Then I just got a DM from someone. So this will be the last question, unless someone asks another one while we're going. But they were wanting to know how the Lattice Exchange, the swap part of it, is that going to be very different? Like, how are the fees going to work on that? Is that going to be like, are you looking to take traffic away from Pancakeswap and some of the other swaps and other chains, or how are you thinking about that?
So, okay, that's a good question. I mean, right now the integration is with Exolix, right? They are the integration partner to make that MVP work, right? To have that cycle closed, at least in a usable way. And as I said, more than 2,000 people have used that to this date, which is actually pretty amazing if you think the short time frame that's been live. Going into the future, once that cross-chain stuff is basically, this is kind of like a swapping function. But if you're talking about a full cross-chain DEX, that's a whole other build out, and that will be built out by a dedicated team and basically plugged into Lattice Gateway. So that's the full build out. So again, like I said, it's MVP stage, fully usable at this point. But the bigger vision with full, cross-chain liquidity that has pool liquidity behind it, that has other types of mechanics in terms of how the swapping function works. That means that the revenue function attached to that is different, that the scale of things is different, and that is being built out by a separate team and basically be plugged into Lattice Gateway. But yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, someone just messaged me too. Every time I hear the Constellation team talk, I get an overwhelming FOMO feeling. So I guess that's a sign of a good AMA, I guess, when people get a little bit of FOMO. So I guess kind of in closing out, just want to reiterate, go check out lattice.is. Again, buying some of the LTX token on KuCoin is an option. Buying some DAG token is an option. You can do the soft node staking. Will open back up on October 1st. It's open for like a couple days at the beginning of each month. And then you can stake your LTX here on the governance page here. And you can pick how long you get more, the longer you lock up for. But I want to thank the audience. Thank you guys for showing up, answering or asking some really good questions. Hop into the Constellation Telegram. Be part of the community. Again, don't let this be your one interaction with this community, but hop into their Telegram. I put a link to that. And Matteo, I appreciate you so much coming on. I appreciate your time. When I asked if I could have someone from Lattice come talk, I did not expect it to be you. So it was a welcome surprise to hear. Oh, I get to talk to Matteo. So nice having you. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, James, and thank you for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Hope this was informative, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.